Hey YouTube, how you doing? It's been only a month, right? It's been a little while since we had a chat, and I thought today I'd catch you up on the last couple months of what I've been doing, what racing we've been doing, and where the car is, how it's going, modifications we've done to the car recently, and the journey, most importantly, that we've had with some of these modifications, which has been interesting, to say the least. So without further ado, I won't hold on for the cliffhanger I left you on the last episode. Modifications to make the car quicker, modifications to keep the car cooler. Now we'll start with cooling because it's slightly less interesting and I want to keep you guys into the end. Everyone who tracks a car, and especially anyone who tracks a Subaru, BRZ, GR86, whatever, everyone talks about how oil cooling is essential on these vehicles. Now if you street the car, this isn't really a problem. But if you're on track and you're consistently driving these cars hard, as intended, and you're up in the rev range a lot of the time because that's where the power band is on these motors. We'll talk about that in a moment. But when you're up in the rev range, working the car hard, you're causing a lot of heat. And so when you're on track with an FA20, FA24, or nearly any car really, you're going to be working the engine hard. It doesn't drive like this on the street, unless it shouldn't drive on the street and you should come to the track instead. But it doesn't work this hard normally. So you need to give it a little bit of help, because it's not able to cool itself down fast enough. Hence, this is where we bring in an oil cooler, and it is a staple in the 86 BRZ community, talking about tracking vehicles with oil coolers as a must. It's not just enough to only change your oil. Now, in saying that, I have gotten 2 years now of tracking my 86 regularly, once a month, once every 2 months. And only managed to change my oil every so often and was perfectly fine. But I wouldn't live by that mantra. It's capable, it's possible, but if you can prevent it and you have the resources to prevent it, well, you might as well. So, what's the solution? It's an oil cooler, as you probably guessed. But oil coolers are expensive. Some of the oil coolers that you can get for this car are outrageous. So let's have a look at a couple, shall we? Now, I'm not calling it any particular companies. I'm just giving you a general idea of pricing here. A Blitz oil cooler, well-known brand, should just be, bolt up, fit right in kit. That's about $1,000. Harrop, another reputable brand here in Australia, they're another $1,000. Jackson Racing oil coolers, Greddy oil coolers, you get anywhere from $900 to $1,500. These start to get a little bit expensive. Now, when you think about it in terms of the car itself, well, maybe it's a good thing to do, just protecting your engine. But I figured I would try a cheaper method. And it turned out to work really well, asterisk with a little bit of work. And that comes to the LinesRacing oil coolers. Now, I know immediately when I pull this up, everyone in the comments are going to be like, that's a dodgy, you can't trust Chinese manufacturing oil coolers. Well, looking into all these kits, I found there was a lot of similarities, and I think a lot of these oil coolers are actually manufactured in the same manufacturing facility for these various different companies. The various coolers that you can find online have many different forms, shapes, but they actually are seemingly high quality. Now, I wanted to try this first. Now, I fully stand by the age-old adage that a poor man pays twice. That you should try and get the best thing that you can at the time for your budget to ensure you don't have to double spend paying for an oil cooler that breaks, or leaks within the first track day, and you have to spend another $1,000 to get the Blitz that you should have in the first place. But I was looking at a lot of these kits, and I found that a lot of these kits actually have the exact same components, almost visually identical components to what I would find on a Mishimoto kit, for example, or the Blitz kit. Similarly, I was finding that a lot of these sandwich plates and these line fittings were very similar. So I figured I'd give it a shot. I ended up getting an oil cooler at the time for $120. It was very similar to this. It was a LinesRacing oil cooler. And I'm going to show you some clips as I'm talking here about this and the installation that we did. So we're bringing you into the action a little bit later, but today we're going to be installing the LinesRacing oil cooler. Now, if you've ever looked for oil coolers online for these cars, you'll know that they're incredibly cheap, which isn't inherently a bad thing, but when it comes to kits, you get what you pay for. and sometimes you have to figure it out. So we're currently in the process of that. So far, all the pieces are actually of really high quality. I'm actually very impressed with the actual components themselves, but obviously this kit doesn't come with much of a installation manual. So what we've done is we whipped the front bumper off, as you can see, and we're routing the cables. Now, if you look online for any other oil cooler install for an 8.6 or any other car, a lot of the time they run up here around the washer bottle, and then there's generally a gap in the front left and right of the engine bays. If you want to go see another time I've done this, go check out the 370Z oil cooler install. That was much more of a headache than what this car is going to be. So now we run the lines up through here, and thankfully on Subarus, oil filter is now in a very easily accessible place. So we're going to dump the sandwich plate on, something like this direction, and then run the lines back down and through. Now, to mount the actual cooler itself, again, any other oil cooler install shows you exactly how to drill through the bottom of this plastic piece here and just mount it straight on that. I was a little bit concerned about that because it's a little bit flimsy, but once we reattach all the clips, front bumper goes back on and ties up underneath it. This should become pretty sturdy. Now, this is a 18 row cooler, so way overkill for probably what we need, but future-proofing your car. And given that one of the biggest problems with this sort of platform and tracking it regularly is oil temperature. So we're going to solve that completely and utterly. Online does say that there's some issues with these fittings leaking. So we'll have to address that, see how it goes once we get there. We may have to Teflon tape it up or something. But other than that, I'll show you when we're in the next stage. So like any sandwich plate mount, it will sit like this in the car. You'll have like a silver threaded insert, which is going to go straight onto the block here. The spacing plate, and then obviously the sandwich plate itself with your 2 AN fittings on it. So we'll chuck that on the car now and see how it looks. So as it is with eBay kits, you're always going to run into problems, and that's what you get for saving, in this case, $900 and something. Anyway, point being, what we have here, as you can see, this is the plate on the block, and we have very little space in here, right? Well, I'm contacting the oil fill cap, and obviously you can see down here, there's like maybe my hand's width between here and the block, here in the factory OEM airbox. So what we need to figure out now is how we're going to route these lines over the top. So if you're buying this kit, it's kit plus. You're not just spending money, but considering it's kit for $175 so far, it's not too bad. So stay tuned as we figure out what the hell we're doing next. So we had some contact with the airbox, and if you don't have a factory airbox, then this probably doesn't apply to you. But if you're thinking about upgrading the airbox, just a note, have a little bit of a look online, but I think you'll find, like what I did, that most people agree the factory airbox is the best for horsepower. So on the road now, bit of an adventure, looking for different AN fittings from our local shop, Racer Industries. Shout out to Racer Industries. Trying to see if we can get a different way of running these lines. But in the end, we actually used the factory box with the fittings that came in the kit. They were more than adequate, they didn't leak, and we were able to figure out a way that could make it work. So therefore, you could get away with using an Orb 10 to AN fitting to run a line in a different way, depending on what your own setup is. Something to note, something you can consider before going into this project. But realistically, you can get away with basically everything as the kit comes, using the existing hardware, existing washers, everything else. And now what we've done is we've installed the actual row cooler itself. Now, obviously, we have a bit of a height restriction, and we have to come up back underneath the crash bar here, because this is the taller 18 row cooler. Now, if you've got the 10 row cooler version of this kit, which seems to be identical as far as I can tell, then you would have a lot less problem. You can bring it as far forth as you want. But if I try and get a shot in there, and it might be too dark, you can see that this runs up here, and I have free space, which is why we've done that to get clearance on those AN fittings. So these fittings run down. I've just chucked the supplied fitting in and a zip tie in here to try and keep these somewhat managed. Obviously, these cable lengths are just generic sizing, I believe. So try and route it here and tuck it up against the washer fluid bottle. And then this platform is actually pretty sturdy, given the fact that this is going to be attached back to the front bumper and clips in the under tray as well. So I'm not too worried about the fact that this is just mounted with the nuts and bolts and drilled through the plastic piece here to make it happen. So all in all, had I known that the fitting was required, yeah, this seems to be a pretty high quality kit. So here you can see two graphs. Now, It's very clear what the story is, but purple here represents the oil temperature, green representing my intake temperature, and blue representing the time of the session. Now, one of these sessions was done prior to the oil cool, obviously, other one afterwards, and they were both done on the sprint layout. But you can see at the peak, where the red line is, of each graph, my oil temp peaks about 130, and I've seen it go higher than 130, 135, 140 even in certain layouts, versus my peak of 103 degrees on the same layout with the oil cooler installed. So obviously the oil cooler is doing a fantastic job. I never had a doubt in my mind that it would after seeing the components. I'm sure you can agree that the kit is actually quite high quality for what you get. With a little bit of finagling, you save yourself thousands of dollars, and I genuinely think that if budget is your focus while achieving the same outcomes, then 100% this oil cooler does the job. Considering I've spent nearly $1,000 or more less than what the kit would normally cost me from Mishimoto HKS Ready, going up to 1,500 Australian dollars. Seems a little bit ridiculous given that this kit seems to have ticked all the boxes. And here it is, guys. I just wanted to show that it does actually fit, but you can tell it's a bit close in here, and it does require a very particular angle to this line. But you can see in here, there's a little bit of oil in there right now. And that's because when I took the oil cooler off, the oil filter off the other day and replaced it, it required a little bit of finagling, and I got a bit of oil everywhere. But other than that, this line, you know, it is not leaking whatsoever. And you can see down the front here, she sits in there just fine. So we're going to tidy the front of the car up and get on to the next set of goodies for today, which is the Z-Tronic Flex Fuel Sensor. So as I said, we're going to talk about the E85 sensor now, which was a massive headache, and not for any fault of the actual kit itself, just some weird things that happen when you start working on cars or you buy cars that have been potentially messed with beforehand. So let's talk about the install first of all. Over here is the Z-Tronic E85 sensor. Now, this sensor has been great. It comes in a kit, it has a module, it comes with this sensor, this harness, and a direct harness for this specific car, which I'll show you in just a moment, as well as a little gauge that I've put in the glove box to show me what percentage of ethanol I'm currently running in the car. Now, if you come over here, the car-specific harness for the 86, or at least the FA20, actually uses a secondary O2 sensor and replaces it to provide a CAN bus signal to the car. Now, when you get the car tuned, the tuner will use that CAN bus signal to infer what percentage of ethanol you're currently running, and therefore they can build a flex fuel tune. Now, it was very important for me to get a flex fuel sensor or flex fuel tune for this car. I daily this car when I'm not at the track. And so I didn't want to be caught in a situation where I could only run United E85, which is the only real gas station in Australia that still sells E85. So I wanted to be able to run 98 if I'm driving to the Gold Coast and I don't want to use 2/3 of a tank just to get there and back. Or if I'm driving out to Warwick, for example, for Morgan Park, I don't have to spend heaps of money on fuel just to get there. I could run over to 98 and be just fine. And I think this is the best way to do it. Now, you can always flash these cars for E85 using an open flash tablet. That's very popular, but it does lock the car to just that one fuel source, and you can only run E85. Or you can only run 98, and then you have to basically empty the tank, flash the car, and then fill it up for it to be fine again. So instead of doing all that business, we've decided to go for the flex fuel approach. And this is how the flex fuel is achieved, by using a CAN bus signal from injecting a different CAN bus signal in place of a secondary O2 sensor. As you can see, this other O2 sensor, this grey one here, is right there down into the header. So this runs across the engine bay, up the top, around the back, and also goes down into the passenger footwell. So now we're in the car. Now we're talking about the second half of the install, which is all the components in the kit. And I think I have a video I can interject here somewhere showing all the components of the kit, or at least a web page showing it. But there's a couple components you have. You have two harness connectors, and you have a module which controls the brains, and then the fourth bit is a gauge. Now, the gauge I've installed in the glove box. In here, you can see the gauge. I don't have the car running right now, but it's just a white little gauge that tells me EX, depending on how much E85 I have in the vehicle right now, which currently is not much, because it's on E98. Now, underneath in here and I won't bother getting in there because you won't be able to see anything anyway, but up under the back left here, there is a grommet, rubber grommet, which has the main body harness come through for the ECU. Now, you can actually feed this through that harness, or you can make a little slit in it and feed this through that grommet. And that will allow you to run the two harnesses that I've pointed out in the engine bay, the one connected to the sensor and the one connected O2 sensor, or not old, but replaced O2 sensor. And both of those feed through into a rectangle box that comes into the kit, which you can tuck up and double side tape up onto your glove box footwell area. And then this cable here runs to your gauge, which you can run over the back of the glove box. So Lockie, I hear you asking, before you left, you told us you were going to like make big bulk power on E85 and you're telling us the kit works. What are these problems? Where have you been? Why have you not just made a video talking about how good it is? Well, I ran into a few problems. Again, not a problem with the kit, not even necessarily my problem, just random crap that happens, and it's so strange. And I figured I'd go into detail here now because someone else no doubt will come across this issue again, and hopefully I can tag this video right, that if you find this video, please let me know if it's actually helped you. So, I took this car to the dyno, and I took it to Diversion Garage near me, which are a fantastic group of fellows, and they really helped me out. They started diagnosing the car and getting it ready for the tune. And then they noticed that the car was only making 100 kilowatts at the wheels. Fuck all. I don't even want to show a dynograph of it. It was just not making enough power, right? So that's really, really strange. The car should be making like 120-ish or so, depending on the dyno. So it's missing a lot of power. And when we looked at the graph, we could notice that a lot of the power was missing down at the low end, where the torque dip already exists on a stock car. So it meant that this car was just an absolute dog to drive sub 5,000 RPM, which was really strange. So they did a little bit more probing for me, and that they had a look at the tech stream that they use on Toyota devices or Toyota ECUs, and it was telling me that the intakes were, and the intake and the exhaust cam gears were stuck. They were not moving. Or not stuck per se, but they were just not adjusting as the car tried to drive through the power band. So, quick, dirty, and probably pretty terrible explanation of VVT for those who don't know. It's advancing or retracting the timing of your intake or your exhaust cam shaft through the use of a cam phaser and allowing the car to make peak efficiency and peak power at any point in the RPM range based upon a bunch of input variables, right? Like you have so much fuel coming into the car, you have so much air coming into the car, and when you look at the, a tuning graph, right, or you have a tuning table, and you have a bunch of cells, all these values, right? You're trying to achieve a certain value at different parts of the load and RPM range. Well, one of the things you can do to help achieve that is advancing or retracting timing to help achieve those numbers. So what we had was a scenario where that was not happening on my engine, obviously, and that meant that anything beneath 5,000 RPM, as I said, was terrible to drive on. And they said, well, there's no real point tuning your vehicle when you have this issue. Let's start investigating. I couldn't figure out off the top of my head what it would be. ECU Tech had some thoughts on the problem, and a lot of early generation 86s apparently have had this issue enough that it's become a notable point that they even have manuals in their tuning support documentation talking about this issue with early generation 86s. But something didn't feel right with me, so I brought it home to think on it and do some more research, as I love to do. And a friend of mine, local mechanic, was looking at the engine bay with me one day and was like, hang on, did this engine get replaced at some point in time? Yeah, it had been. I remember speaking to him about it when I bought the car, but the original owner had actually changed the engine after it blew up on him, the first owner, sold it to the second owner, and I'm the third owner of the vehicle, and I remember it getting changed. And so we did a little bit of talking and researching, but what I found out was that the intake and exhaust cam trigger wheels, right? And I'll show some photos on the screen here. They're different between the late generation and early generation, pre and post facelift 86s. So up to like 2017 or so, and then post 2017, there's different trigger wheels on the front of the cam phasers and therefore cam shaft. Now what that meant is that the sensors have changed and are looking for two different types of values. So Lockie, why does this matter? Well, When we started tearing into the engine and having a look at through the timing cover, as well as a shop that opened this up and actually did the work for me, they noticed that I actually had the 2018 block, but 2013 era sensors and fuel lines and intake. So you'll notice that I don't have a red intake that newer engines did. This is exactly why. They've taken the block, thrown it together, and put everything from the old generation on the top, because you can. That does work. So that's why we never had working VVT, because I have 2013 sensors and a 2018 trigger wheel. Okay, so I've brought this image into Paint to see if we can maybe explain things a little bit more. So here are the two encoders. On the bottom, this is what the old one is. This is what the pre-2017 version of the car is. And this is the facelift, right? This is the new one, right? So I currently had this one in the car, right? Obviously, it doesn't work with the sensors I have. This is why we had this old issue, blah, blah, blah. And the reason why the sensor didn't work is because the sensor is looking for these cutouts in the old one, right? So if you think about the position of how this whole system works, right, this is a terrible explanation, but you can basically see that the encoder here is sending a light beam in this direction. As the light beam travels, it's going to reach the trigger wheel. Now, where the light is able to actually make it through the trigger wheel or not is how the encoder knows when there is something in front of it or not. It's like a position sensor. It's looking for a reflection in the light. And so on the bottom here, when it's looking at the sensor, right, the sensor sees, this is a terrible circle, but it basically is tracking the wheel as it spins around in that path, right? And then when it sees a gap, the signal goes low. So it looks high, 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 and then it comes down to a nub, so it sees no signal. Like if this is voltage, you could call this like 1 volt, and this is 0 volts, right? A lot of time they just work in voltage. So here you can see it's going high signal, and then as soon as it sees a gap in the circle, it goes to low, right? There's no feedback, there's no value, so it goes to 0. So the computer knows that it's come across a nub, so it uses that to position itself. Now, the new trigger wheel, does the same thing. It shines a light. But rather than contacting with the metal plate most of the time around here, except for when there's a nub, it sees nothing most of the time and then goes high when there's a nub. So nothing, 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 high. And this is 1 volt and this is 0 volts. Let's say it's not exact. It's just for argument's sake. So what was happening was that my car, rather than seeing the high and low, because these are the same diameter. So let me be clear, the trigger wheels were the same size. So when you overlay them on top of each other, what was happening was that the sensor, my encoder in the car, my cam position sensor, only saw this ring of data. And I think you can understand the problem right now, because if I draw it over here in red, this is the value it saw the whole time. Flat. So if you're looking at it like below, it's 1 volt, right? It never had the section that it needs down here to throw a value and say, hang on, here is the position of the trigger wheel. So fundamentally what was happening was that my trigger wheel saw a constant value, and therefore it didn't think that anything was wrong. But because it saw a constant value and it never found itself, it never bothered trying to adjust the trigger wheel because it didn't want to cause an issue. So now we have the situation where I have to pull these trigger wheels off the front of the engine. So we've determined the issue, we replaced the trigger wheels, all's good in the world. Car drives substantially better, surprisingly, actually unsurprisingly, the car drives fantastic now that it actually has working trigger wheels. Awesome. But now we need to go get it tuned on E85. So the car goes back to Diversion Garage. The fellas at Diversion Garage do a great job tuning it. The tune feels fantastic. It now makes 145 kilowatts, which is substantial, 45 kilowatts more than what I used to race with, and another 25 or so kilowatts more than what it would make stock. So I'm super happy. I'm over the moon. The car drives so unbelievably well. It actually has horsepower. So for a final treat about whether it's worth to move to E85 for your Toyota 86 or your BRZ, here is my fastest lap around Queensland Raceway on the very next QR day that I could do. So welcome back, YouTube. It's been a hot minute. If you watched my previous video, you would know that today has now been a long time coming. It is currently June, and we are heading to June's round of time attack at Queensland Raceway. So I've probably already spoken about it, but today E85 is the name of the game. Honestly, I'm thinking about getting E86 as a number plate. It could be kind of funny. Point being, today we have E85 in the vehicle. We currently have 3/4 of a tank. I got 40 liters in jerry cans behind me, but we had a bit of an issue with the 86, and it turns out that I have been severely handicapped up until this point in time. This is the first track day the 86 hasn't been handicapped in some way or form by a mechanical fault that I had absolutely no chance of catching by myself. Irrespective of all that, we have a Miata to chase, because there is a blue Miata that you've seen in these videos, and I am very far behind him, or have been. And I really want to see how much we managed to reduce the gap to this Miata, who has an awesome driver behind the wheels and is well set up and just simple, but driven really well. And we're going to see how close we can get to that car today. Now, just for comparison's sake, we have currently done a 1:02.5 lap time in the sprint layout. We're going to be using the sprint as our sort of benchmark. We've got a ton of E85 in the boot. We've got a full tank now, so nothing else to it but get on the road and head out to Queensland Raceway.
Alrighty, let's get this shit. It's a big boss. Fuck me, this is a rocket ship. Jesus Christ. You can seriously feel how much more go it's got. This is actually substantially different. What the fuck? What the fuck? This is insane! Holy! Dude, it's a rocket ship! Third gear, that's insane! Faster than I would be at the end of the straight.
For the sake of the video getting so long already, let me shortcut some of this day for you guys. First of all, we went and killed it. As you just heard it, went out first lap. In the warm-up lap, I'm already feeling an insane difference in the car. Feels so good. I know PBs are gonna get smashed today. So, we went out and we did Clubman first, and then we did sprint. But in the middle of it, we even got to chase down an M2. which was frustrating.
Man, stop blocking me! I cannot begin to tell you how insane this car feels right now. Like, it is... This car just feels amazing. Like, there is so much more. E85, doing the E85, fixing my engine, right, first of all, but then E85, the single best modification I've ever done to any car, full stop. Like, I went from lapping in a 102.5, you know, second fastest in street class, trying really hard, to today, I'm chasing M2s and like on the lights, trying to get them to let me past. I'm like doing times faster than shitloads of other cars that are way more capable than me. Like, this car is basically a stock 86 with fucking wheels, tires, and suspension, and street pad. What are street pads, really, on this car? And I'm going to need new brake pads now, but like, this is an unoptimized setup. I have street camber on this car, and I am threatening to go sub-minute. And that's the goal. Like, it's a big task, but I think that I have a solid chance of getting a sub-minute, like a 59.9. So we've got to find about 8 tenths. We got this shit.
So I wanted to talk through the lap. Immediately, E85 this car, as you said, an incredible difference. Can't believe I didn't do it sooner. If you're at an 8.6, highly recommend it. Coming down the straight, our top speed is much, much higher. We can see we're already well past 155, which would be a really good peak top speed. We end up reaching 168 if you go back and pause it, which is fantastic. Already, you know, 12, 15 kilometers an hour faster at the end of the straight. That's substantial gains everywhere. Love to see it. A lot of our cornering speed is the same. Obviously, we've done no performance handling modifications at this day, but the power exiting the corner is just so much better. It does mean I have to actually be smarter about modulating the throttle, and it's something that I do need to learn a lot coming into the last few track days of the year, because I can't just flatten the throttle on corner exit because there's not enough horsepower to actually upset the car. I now actually need to drive the car a little bit more. And on the more recent track days after this one, come around turn 6, being able to use the throttle to actually get the car to turn, to rotate, rather than just kind of waiting and waiting until I can get on the throttle to not just push the front tires, is the name of the game. But here we do a 1 minute 0.7. Now I can flash here the time from the Speed Hive race tracking, and we actually did a 1:05 dead. And following that, in the Clubman, we managed to do a 1:03.6, which is awesome. Remembering I was at a 1:07.1 prior to this day. So we have taken seconds out of our time. There we go. The end of the saga. I'm so glad we managed to figure out the issue. I'm very happy with the oil cooler. It's held up to many more track days since this was recorded, and it's been flawless. Oil temps have been magical and can't complain. So if you're in the market for a LinesRacing oil cooler, I would highly recommend it, especially if you have some know-how about you and you're willing to sort of figure things out. It's pretty basic on these cars. In terms of E85, genuinely could not be happier with how it's turned out. The results are fantastic. The car feels like it's never had before. Feels like how it should have come from factory, honestly. So if you're in the market and you're in the GT86 or GR86 world, I think definitely worth considering E85 on these motors. It makes a substantial difference for very little impact and modifications that can easily be reverted. Finally, that's it for today, but the next video is King of QR. Stay tuned for that in the next couple of weeks. Sorry I'm behind schedule, just got really busy as I mentioned, but a massive shout out to anyone who's come up to me recently and said that they watch the videos. It means a lot. Or liking the video and leaving a comment means a lot to me, guys. Shout out to my Instagram. Follow me on LOTECH Motorsports on Instagram if you feel like it. There's a link in the next slide. But that's all for this one. I've held enough of your time. See you next time, YouTube.